Welcome back to Speaking of the Spectrum, the podcast brought to you by Autism Society Greater Hudson Region, a nonprofit located up here in all the upstate New York's areas, I think, Joe. We cover a lot of 21 counties now.
21 counties now.
21 counties. And that's a lot to cover, so we're going to need your help through the podcast. If you feel like and subscribing, hope you feel like donating a little bit of cash too, maybe some coffee money our way. There's a link down in the bio or the description of this episode. Or just head on over to ASGHR, which again stands for Autism Society Greater Hudson Region.org. As always, I'd like to thank our wonderful friends at Pulse MD Urgent Care who are sponsoring our podcast, keeping us bringing this to you. Thank you guys so much for bringing it to us, to everybody. And if you're ever in the area and you're looking for some good medical care, Pulse MD is the place to go. As a quick reintroduction to me, my name is Shahrukh Sultan, project manager by day, autism parent by day, by night, and at times many hours of the night when my son wakes up in the middle of the night because he's blasting his iPad up, or if he needs help and his only way to call us is by turning his volume of the TV all the way up. That's how my wife and I know he needs us. That's his communication style, but that opens up everybody. You know, dad's got to jump into action, get things under control, help out, keep a completely calm, demeanor. But it wasn't always that way, right? Like when this diagnosis started happening and as he started getting older and his activities got more louder and more sort of needing, right? He wasn't a baby anymore. There was a period of it where it first wasn't easy. You tend to like as a parent or as a dad, maybe it's a male thing. I don't know, but you tend to lose your temper a little bit. You start to fall out of your balance. But it didn't happen overnight. Like it takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of patience to get there. It's something I had to work on personally. And now that we've been parents for over a decade now, and I think we're starting to get a little bit under control until the next surprise comes our way, because there's always something new that are gonna my kid's gonna have come our way. But whenever I look back, I think of it as like, as a parent, the first time you get that first diagnosis that your child's autistic, for us it was when we were 2 or 3 years old, and that in many ways feels like you suddenly went from playing pickup basketball to suddenly finding yourself in the middle of the NBA playoffs. And you're like, oh my God, there's all these things around here I gotta learn, I gotta up my skills. You're not gonna make all the shots, right? Like you need to, as a parent, give yourself some grace. There's gonna be misses, but you gotta be patient with yourself too. And the more patient you are with yourself, the more the child will sense your emotions. I feel maybe it's a thing with autistic kids, or I'm not sure if it's unique to my son, but I feel like he can sense literally our heartbeat. He can tell when my wife and I am tensing up, and he reacts to that. So when I started understanding that, the more calm we were on the house, even if we have to wake up 3 a.m. at night to go, clean up his bed sheets or whatever it might be. He might even need another bowl of rice. That's him. Yep. We have to spring into action and get it for him. And, on a personal level, again, you might call me religious, but I feel like, what Islam has taught me a little bit about this is that the moment I started understanding that the directive from Islam or from religion is that especially children are your privilege to take care of, because they're going straight to heaven. And if you take care of them, they're your ticket to heaven. I've had friends actually tell me this that really changed my perspective. And I was like, wow, these days, Joe, like you get inspiration from everywhere, from like a random rap artist on TikTok or something. We'll say something and people are like, oh, this is the greatest mind blow. What is so wrong with getting a little bit of inspiration from religion, right? Like it's structured, it gives you a path to follow. And that's where I've been like drawing it from. And the more I look into it, the more it's been rewarding. Yep. Right? It benefits the child, it benefits us as a family.
It gives structure and overall guidance. Right. And, being Catholic and my mom being a nun, and that's an entire story for other podcasts and for adult beverages, it's a different set of guidances that are, based on some of the same principles along the way. And there are very similar in a lot of ways, whether it is Islam, Catholicism, Judaism, Hinduism, even Zen in a lot of ways is about taking care of the weak and being present in the moment in a lot of ways. And our special needs kids need us to be positive and calm, almost that state of bliss, or eudaimonia, as the Stoics would use.
Eudaimonia, that was the word?
Eudaimonia, which is, your higher purpose and being almost like in balance with what's going on externally and internally.
It's almost like the OODA loop you talked about in an earlier episode, right? Like
Sort
you
of, yeah.
observe, orient, decide, and act. Was that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's almost that you just stop, take a moment, figure out what's happening, reorient yourself, and then you diffuse the situation.
Or
Panic later.
maybe not even reorient again, but appreciate. So this moment, even if the kid's having a meltdown, if we are present and calm, they are more likely to be calm. And I'm actually reading a bunch of stuff right now on the polyvagal theory, and how the nervous system can be basically revved up at all times. And this is ancient, going back to reptilian almost. But if we can be calm ourselves, it calms the environment. Calm is contagious. And so our special kids and other people around them, if they can maintain that centering, it will help them overall. And when they spill the milk, or they're having the meltdown, or the kid does something stupid, whether it's a neuronormal kid or a kid on the spectrum, we get amped up, especially if we've got crazy stuff going on at work, and we've got taxes are due, or all this other stuff. Our emotional reserves are drained.
Yeah.
But we need to pause, take a deep breath, which connects our parasympathetic and our sympathetic nervous systems, that allows us to calm down and be able to recenter, recharge, and balance that kid out. And this is taught in the Old Testament, in the Torah. It's taught in the New Testament. I've seen references to it in the Quran. Obviously, I haven't read the Quran as much as you have. I've seen it in the Vedas. I've seen it in all the major world religions, of finding your inner peace, and then that brings peace to the world.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what our kids need.
Right, and that's what I was talking about. Is like where I'm drawing the calm from is knowing that, like, all right, there's a directive from religion to say, this child, this is your ticket to heaven. You almost have to flip the, I feel like a lot of stigma, or a lot of hesitation associated with like parents on the autistic spectrum, is that you almost starting up like, why did I get this diagnosis for my child? I'm guilty. I must have done something wrong, so I'm being punished for this, right? But you flip that around and be like, well, maybe God's given you this. Like, if you're a religious person thinking that way, you flip that around and think, well, maybe God gave you this child because you are well equipped to handle this child.
Or God is going to bring out the best in you so that you can handle that situation and other situations.
Right.
So the obstacle becomes the way, as Ryan Holiday talks about.
The obstacle becomes the way. I really like that. Oh, yeah. Very nice. So, almost like I always keep thinking about now that I'm at this part of the journey, right, where I've kind of been through a lot of the tough part, which I feel like there's still tough parts, but it's not fighting with myself anymore. It's now, making the situation more acclimated from. But when I go back and now I look at new parents who might reach out and be like, hey, how did you get here? Or, I'm feeling frustrated and this and that. And, I look back at them and I'm like, why is it taking them so long to figure it out? And then, another parent of an autistic child framed this for me, and she said that, like, as a parent, you're still going through a grieving period, right? You don't get over that instantly, right? You don't just read the diagnosis and
you got to go through the 7 stages of grief. The first one's shock,
right?
And then typically anger.
There's denial.
Yep.
Yeah, for me, denial was the first phase, right? Because maybe it's a cultural stigma or something, but there was something that me said, no, it can't be this. Let's try all these other things first. Let's get him into preschool, see if he interacts with other kids, and that'll work. That didn't work, and it took me a while and a lot of convincing to myself to understand that, okay, this is autism and this is how we're going to deal with it. And then the project manager and me sprung in. It's like, okay, let's formulate an action plan. And I give kudos to my wife, who did a lot of like the paperwork behind getting, all these different services and stuff for him. Coming to our fact of the day, right? And some of this is structure on children, but we'll get to that. So here's what I learned, Joe, was a bit staggering. About 70% of individuals with autism have at least one co-occurring mental health condition, such as anxiety and depression. And 70%, so most, vast majority. And the reason this caught my eye is because, I didn't even consider parts of my son's behavior as anything other than autism, right? So if he was having a meltdown or something, if he's stemming, or if he's crying, if he's feeling depressed, to me, it was, up to a certain point in time, was all autism. It's like he's reacting to something else. It's just his autism kicking in. It didn't really occur to me that he was actually having anxiety until he had a seizure at school one day, right? And that's where I took a moment and I sat back and played things back to what led him to be anxious. We had a lot of guests over that summer, or we were traveling a lot, and he wasn't getting sleep, and we weren't getting sleep. There's a lot of change in routine. All of that buildup one day happened at school where he had a seizure. And that's when we went to the doctor, obviously, and they gave us some insight. They're like, all his symptoms here are not autistic related, they're anxiety related. So then once you figure out what's wrong, you can figure out how to treat it. Yep. And that's why that particular fact or that statistic caught my eye. I know I usually like to give more positive statistics, like how many people on the spectrum are like super smart or whatever. Yep. This is almost the opposite, but it's something very important. I think as a community society, we need to recognize. And at the end of the day, you really have to understand that like autism doesn't define the child, right? It's not just the child, it's just part of the child.
Right.
Right.
And so like they can basically become overwhelmed because their emotional reserves are drained, their energy reserves are drained because they're in this environment that is basically pushing their nervous system into the yellow. They're outside their safe space. So things that we can do to help create that sense of calm again, not only us maintaining the calm, but changing the environment, like reducing the noise level, reducing the light levels. That's one of the reasons why the weighted vests or blankets that a lot of the kids like, where, I'd wrap them up like a baby burrito, basically, as I'd say, that tightness, Dr. Temple Grandin talked about this with her hugging machine, allows them to have that sense of calm. They feel safe, and that then slows down the nervous system overall, and it pulls them out of that fight or flight mode in a lot of ways.
So is this hugging machine an actual like hugging machine, or is it like a physical action? You could go hug the kid. Is this like a name to
it? She actually derived it from basically a machine that the cows would use to put pressure on them, because cows, and I've got friends in the dairy community that can be like
who aren't you friends with? Friends of the dairy community? I mean, this is amazing.
So, if the cows that get like essentially like stroked like that or hugged like that actually produce more milk because they're calm. And so it allows their body to produce more of the hormones that produce more milk. And humans are the same way in a lot of ways. That's our oxytocin system. And that is the cuddle hormone or happiness hormone. And it allows the entire nervous system to calm down because of the feeling of safety that it engenders.
Gotcha. Now, I'm going to pause on our autism discussion for a second because the color of your shirt is both impressive and distracting me a little bit. I mean, it's just the orange and the Hawaiian theme going on, and here I am in my monochromatic black and white background with just a black hoodie, very standard Mr. Robot setup over here. And just put my hoodie on here. And Joe has a wonderful orange background going. He's got a matching Hawaiian shirt with leaves.
I'm the colorful one in our duo.
Oh, I see how it is, right? But like that actually is funny because it's the hero of the day I have is actually a pro surfer from Hawaii, which is funny because you're wearing a Hawaii shirt. His name is Clay Marzo. So Clay Marzo is a professional surfer. He's famous for his unique double-jointed style of turns and spins. So apparently, Mr. Marzo here can make moves in water like even Aquaman can, right? Now, Clay Marzo was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome towards the end of 2007. They say that he has an intuitive understanding of the waves. So this water theme keeps coming back. We've talked about it before. Like we talked with Dr. Rodney in our last episode, right? How like swimming was sort of an outlet for him. We've talked about our swim program that the Autism Society is trying to develop because autistic children are most likely to drown from swimming. Drowning is the number one cause of death for autistic children. So our, again, shameless plug, not so much to our nonprofit organization, but as I mentioned in an earlier episode, we've developed a program called Sensible Swimming. Our esteemed board member, Mary Cavini, set that up, and you can take your child or autistic young adult there, and there's a number of coaches there who train the child to at least have water safety, right? So coming back to Clay Marzo here, right? Like he understands waves in a way nobody else can. That allows him to do these amazing moves. Now, when I heard about that, I kind of looked back in his history a little bit more. Impressive stats. At 10 years of age, he won a 200-meter freestyle event at Hawaii State Swimming Championships. He volunteers for a nonprofit organization called Surface Healing, And that what that organization does is they arrange surfing camps and surfing experiences with children with autism spectrum disorder in U.S. and Canada. Now, that obviously I didn't stop there. I kept looking more into what
Down
is
the rabbit hole.
down the rabbit hole I go, right? The autistic parent in the middle of the night, his kid woke up. I was trying to look for a fact that he could talk about on the show. But this gets really cool. The Story Band Surfers Healing, this nonprofit, is actually kind of really interesting too. So their founder, Israel Parsko, is lovingly called Izzy, right? He's the founder of this organization, and he's the son of a surfing legend himself. So that's why he was sort of interested in surfing and stuff. He himself is not in the spectrum, but he had a child at the age 2 was diagnosed with autism, much like many of us. And one day he was out there in a beach, and his wife and his family were there. I think they were attending like some surfing championship or something. In this event, as so often happens with us, is the autistic child starts having a meltdown. Now his wife's already overwhelmed with the other children or with something else going on at the event. So dad springs into action. He sees no other option, but he grabs his child who's freaking out, who's having a meltdown, and just decides to let me take him into the water and see what happens. And he sees that water suddenly calmed his child down, and that's where Izzy had an aha moment, and he realized that okay, maybe water, we can explore this a little bit more, right? We talked in previous episodes and multiple times about the more we learn about autism, the better community we can create for autistic individuals and children, and then the better the world can be. So he did exactly that, and he founded Surfers Healing. Actually, one of our board members sends their child there every year. Yep. So that's really cool. How are you underwater, Joe? You feel like are you just overwater with the Hawaiian
No,
theme,
I love scuba diving. Okay. And so my buddies from grad school, we'd go scuba diving, and if there was a parrotfish, I would my ADHD would kick in, and I would just follow it because it's just absolutely gorgeous. But you're floating, so you don't have the normal weight on you that you have when you're on top of the water or when you're on land, and you can regulate your buoyancy just with your breath. So my buddies actually have pictures of me floating there upside down in a lotus position, just bobbing up and down slowly as I took breath, and I was just absorbed in the environment. And earlier we talked about calm. Water has a natural calming nature from the sound of it, from the feel of it, that our autistic children really glom onto. But water is a theme through all the major religions. And if you go to almost any spa or relaxation point, what are they using? They've got little waterfalls. They've got the sound of a stream.
You go to an expensive hotel lobby or a big business building.
They've got a fountain.
There's a water fountain,
Why? Because of the calming nature of it. And it goes back to, even our pre-human days in a lot of ways, that was the source from which we derived. And so it calms and mellows us. And from the reptilian part of our nervous system, it allows us to find peace. And that calms everything down, and that puts us in a state of safety. And it also frees up a lot of creativity, because we don't have to be aware and looking for the saber-toothed tiger or any of that sort of stuff. So our higher functions can really come into play. And that's why a lot of great thinkers have spectacular ideas while standing in the shower. Or,
shower thoughts is a thing.
Shower thoughts is a thing. Or, getting out of the bath screaming eureka.
Yeah.
Right? This is a thing. And so using I don't want to call it sensory deprivation, because that is an extreme version of this, but the calming nature of a bath is something that almost all parents have seen with a crying toddler, whether on the spectrum or not. And so these are some of the coping mechanisms, essentially, that we can use for our children. Or if you're overwhelmed, go take a hot shower, and it'll
I actually remember from the summer. I was having a very busy summer. There's a lot of things happening personally and at work and stuff. And there's one morning I woke up. I was like, everybody's asleep at home. I woke up early. I went to the gym and just went for a swim. I was like, I just need to be underwater, just quiet time. and just swim it out. It wasn't a run. I love running, and it doesn't look like it, but I do. And that's usually my go-to therapy. But in this instance, like I need some water for some reason, and that's why people love going to beaches, right? Like that's the whole thing. I mean, sidebar, but like for me, swimming also helped me get over back pain issues. So I used to have a sciatic nerve pinch, and I started seeing a chiropractor, and he's like, work on your core. So then one of the things he recommended was like go swim, because that extends your body with the gravity the way it's meant to be, the way it was designed, and that helped unpinch the nerve or build core, whatever. But I haven't had the back problem since. So, speaking of the spectrum, is a show where you don't just learn about being an autism paired autistics, you get some health advice too, right? Like,
and you know what? Our sponsors probably like hearing that too.
oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know, because it takes the patients away from them. I don't know. But speaking of parental tips and stuff, we're going to come back to our segment called the Adam Project, which, as much as I'd love to use that to get a hook out to our favorite actor, Ryan Reynolds, to catch his attention, because he has a movie called The Adam Project. Go see it. And Ryan, if you're watching this and we're trolling you totally, make an appearance and tell us a cease and desist in a Deadpool costume, and we'll happily take it.
Yeah, or even show up in the Green Lantern costume, man. I mean, we'll take that.
He would if it wasn't CGI.
Yeah.
Fair point. So the Adam Project, in the context of this podcast, stands for Autism Dads and Moms. And our goal here is to sort of, in a way, crowdsource maybe, right? Tips and tricks or anything you've learned as an autism parent, and share it with the rest of us. And maybe someday we'll build a knowledge base or something out of it. But it's crowdsourced. It's from you, our listeners, our viewers. Send it our way and we talk about it. But since we haven't had one yet, we're still in the early days. Joe, do you have anything for the Adam Project today?
So one of the things was some statistics that I found while I was doing some research, and Rodney talked about this in one of our previous episodes, was how he was bullied and abused in a lot of ways. And in private conversations with him, he's told me a lot more than what he revealed here. And, unfortunately is all too common. I saw a statistic, and this is taken right before COVID, these statistics, so it's probably worse now because of the lack of support systems that people had during the pandemic. But over 55%, almost 60% of autistic children have had physical abuse of some form. Autistic kids are literally 3 times more likely to be abused than their peers. And autistic adults, over 50%, almost 60% of them, again, have been the victim of some form of sexual abuse. And so when you look at the intersection between physical or sexual abuse, it is not the vast majority, but a decent majority, somewhere around 2/3 of the adults on the spectrum have been the victim in some way, shape, or form.
And that's what's important, to keep doing the work that we try to do. And whatever you take away from this podcast, hopefully, is that you keep trying to make it a better world for everybody, not just anyone on the autism spectrum. Because when you do that, it makes it a better world for everybody. And to me, that's my takeaway for today. We can, wrap it up here, Joe, unless you had any other closing thoughts.
No, I mean, it all comes down to, it doesn't matter what your religious belief system is or your code of ethics or whatever. Part of our responsibility here is to help make the world a better place. As Muhammad Ali, the greatest, said, service to others is the rent we pay for our room here on earth.
Yes.
And so every single one of our listeners can do something to help others and make this world a little bit better place for our entire community.
Very well said. And as Bill and Ted said, be excellent to each other. This has been Speaking of the Spectrum. Speak soon, like and subscribe. Bye-bye.